Hello, everyone. This is Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspired show. And my guest today is Benjamin Castiello. You already heard him talk to me several weeks ago, but we thought that we left some things unsaid, and we decided to do another interview. So I'm going to refresh your memory on some information about Benjamin. Increasingly concerned about the unsustainable trajectory of our civilization, Benjamin exited the corporate world to find out why is humanity on a path of self-destruction and how can we change course. He's the executive director of New World Together, a transdisciplinary research and education platform pioneering a holistic approach to sustainability through human solutions. Benjamin has had spiritually emergent experiences and is a beautiful and inspiring speaker. Benjamin, thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for having me.
So just to remind our viewers, you are based in Bali, a beautiful island, and this is where the head office of the organization is.
Yes, indeed. I've settled myself in Bali 15 years ago, and this is where New World Together is.
Yes. So we chat after the first interview, and you felt that you still have a lot to share with us. And let's start with your journey through insanity and what you understood about mental illness and spiritual emergencies that follow it.
Yeah, so I think it's a subject that could be interesting because a lot of people, I believe, are dealing with confusion. We're going through a period of massive change. And a lot of people, I think for many, this is a bit, it's not necessarily easy to process. Maybe I will relate to my experience. I've indeed been through spiritual emergencies. My first spiritual emergency was when I was 25 years old. And I was diagnosed with having done a psychosis. I was heavily medicated, put in a psychiatric hospital. At the time, I thought I was a prophet that was going to come to unite humanity, and that didn't go very well. Unfortunately, it was, unfortunately or fortunately, I cannot say, but in any case, it was my first spiritual emergency. And at the time, the psychiatric institution were absolutely not able to recognize my process as a spiritual emergency. And as a result, I was institutionalized and heavily medicated. And at the time, they said that I would probably have to take medication for all my life. Long story short, I was able to stop the medication. And my spiritual emergencies restarted in 2017, so a bit more than 10 years after. And in 2017, I had to go through all the process again because it was interrupted by the medication at the time. And it was not safe for the same reasons. In 2017, I was placed 4 times in mental institutions. Again, I was diagnosed with what they call it, like a chronic mental disease, bipolar, and they wanted me to stay on meds for all my life. And I was actually very lucky to be able to make it through. But I realized that the institutions that were supposed to take care of me would basically have really destroyed my life in a way, because they were stopping a process that, in my case, was needed for me to follow my journey, to find myself and follow my journey. And I think it's really important for people to understand that what is being described as mental illness by contemporary science, and particularly the science of psychiatry, might be actually a process of spiritual awakening, or it might be simply that your consciousness is disaligned and tapping stuff into dimensions that is not relative to our dimensions, and that creates mental confusion. I also want, it makes me think as well that we often speak about mental health, but very often it's not just mental health, it's also emotional health. What I realized with my issue or my spiritual emergencies is that I wasn't able to cope with my mental and emotional process, and I couldn't find a safe space to deal with it. I mean that instead of having people that could reassure me and guide me through the process, I found people who were pathologizing it and making it worse, basically making me afraid of myself and of my process. And I find that extremely concerning. And I thought it's something that we should talk about, because maybe some people in your audience might know others who are going through such process or might themselves undergo such process. And unfortunately, today, the institutions who are supposed to take care of it are very ill prepared and don't understand these processes.
Yeah, yes, I totally agree with that. And I can tell you that I had another guest on my podcast several weeks ago, and he went through the same issues. He voluntarily walked into a psychiatric institution saying, "Can you study my brain? Because I'm going through a spiritual emergence. I think I'm awakening spiritually, and I want you to study my brain." And and he came prepared with documentation and everything else, just to show them that he's not crazy. And they totally disregard what he had to say. They put him in a straitjacket. They start feeding him chemicals, and only because he came by his own volition was able to get out very early in the process. But as you said, these institutions are not ready to cope, because this is not something tangible for these schools when they prep the students, and which will later on become the specialists in the field. They don't understand this awakening process and what's going on with us. And as you said, they have to be awakened in order to understand what's happening with the patients and help them. Otherwise, they cannot hold space for them, and they will just feed them chemicals. That's the issue.
Yeah. So one thing that appears to be a concern, I think, is this scientism. You know, this it's almost a religious approach to science, where everything that is non-material is being completely disregarded or denied, and therefore, a spiritual emergencies is considered a mental health because it induces a modification of the brain chemistry. And my concern is that, and I'm glad we raised the subject here, is that there's probably tens of thousands, maybe more, people who are falling into this pathologizing machine that is psychiatry right now. And there seems to be a big lack of awareness of what actually mental illness is outside the realm of what is measurable, which is, brain patterns. And it's something that, at least at this stage, because we don't have much possibilities to make things change, that we can speak about here, because I think it's something that people should be aware of. This is extremely dramatic. There are lives that are being wasted, lives that are being destroyed on a daily basis by a psychiatric institution that doesn't understand mental illness, doesn't understand trauma, doesn't understand consciousness, doesn't understand alternate state of consciousness, doesn't understand multidimension. I can speak about maybe what happened to me and what was the big issue during my mental illness. first of all, so what happened is I started connecting to my higher self, and therefore to get a lot of downloads and a lot of emotional release, and both at the same time. And the problem is that the emotional release were extremely powerful. I mean, the emotions that we're going through were very intense. And the mental, the downloads that I was getting were not necessarily interpreted properly. I mean, I didn't understand that at the time I was being subjective in the way I was downloading information, that my subconscious structure would decode what I was downloading. I thought I was getting basically, divine messages. And so basically what I realized much later is that I didn't integrate, my mental had not integrated something that is fundamental and that we haven't integrated collectively yet, which is multidimensionality. The way I could describe it is that we are all part of an omnipotent multiverse. And that omnipotent multiverse is absolute, it's objective, it's infinite. And we as human beings, we are ego, we are relative, limited, and subjective. And so when, for the first time, we consciously connect to that omnipotence and we start getting downloads of information and release, very often we identify ourselves with it. We start to think that we are the absolute, that suddenly we speak the words of God. And I'm saying that, highlighting the fact that this is exactly what happened with scripture, religious scripture, which today for many people are considered above human words, but to me are human words. And we have an issue here, by the way, because we are still confused about the absolute and relative. The scriptures might be the texts that have been downloaded of the channeling at some moment of someone who connected to the absolute, but they are not the words of God. They are still human interpretations of the words of God. And I think we are collectively still very confused because we haven't integrated this multidimensionality. I've also noticed that to many extent, what separates us in our society, what separates what we call sane and what we call insanity is the number of people who believe into something. Let it say, in my process, I thought I was the prophet that was going to unite humanity, right? And the fact that nobody believed me made me crazy. But if everybody had believed me, then I would have become that prophet.
Yes.
And so, our belief define our reality. And so what I notice is that in our society, we have a lot of beliefs that are collective and that are actually quite psychotic in their structure. But because they are established and they are considered normal, then people live very well with them. Unlike some beliefs that are considered not normal and that get people to be marginalized and diagnosed with mental illness. So I think here we're opening a Pandora box, but I just want to highlight that there is a lot. These subjects open the door to many others, and notably to the structure of our collective consciousness and of the collective unconscious, and notably of the belief system that stand in both and that structure what we consider sane and what we consider insane. And interestingly, what I discovered after going through insanity is that a lot of the patterns or cultures or belief systems that are considered sane are actually not sane at all. And a lot of the belief systems that are considered insane or that are marginalized are actually very often much more rational. And so I don't know what is going to unfold in the coming years, but I think right now we are in a stage in human evolution where there is a disclosure, there is an unveiling, in the sense that the dominant beliefs which have structure our society and our cultures and structure, and in many aspects limited our minds as well, are starting to dissolve. They are starting to collapse, and there's an emergence of higher consciousness, which is slowly replacing this matrix of the dominant society. And I think there will be a lot of people, an increasing number of people going through what I've been through. And so I think this is a very important subject, because I don't want people to think that they are mentally ill, that this is a condition that they are going to have to deal with for the rest of their life. I want them to understand that if they are going through such process and they can ground themselves, they get ungrounded emotionally and mentally, it means that they need to do deep inner work. There's probably trauma healing to do. There's probably like limiting belief to dissolve and irrational fear to evacuate. But this doesn't mean that this is a mental illness that cannot be healed. And I hope your audience can hear that, and I hope it will save people from those institutions that can destroy them. So that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that, I mean, the medicine that the psychiatric world is using is necessarily bad. It might be useful temporarily if someone really gets ungrounded and really gets dangerous for himself and for others, but it should never be a long-term prescription. It should not be a for-life prescription. It should be used to slow the process, help the person to ground itself, and then after that is the time to do deep inner work and to address. Generally, the issues come from the unconscious. Yeah, for me, basically, what happened is that I was getting really information from the source or from my higher self, but I was decoding it with a middle-aged unconscious, very Christian base actually. So I was very into duality, into angel and demons, and so there was a lot of fear. And then I thought I was a reincarnation of the Christ, and I now understand what I was seeing, that these were just archetypal construction. Basically, I'm touching an energy, that energy has an information, and I was interpreting it through symbols, the symbols that my unconscious structure understood. I didn't have a proper decoding system to handle this information, and that I had to develop myself. But yeah, what I found is that our society is so unprepared and so ignorant related to these processes. And there's definitely something we need to recognize and collectively address, because again, this is costing life on a daily basis.
Yes, I agree. I mean, there are so many things to unpack from what you said. And I'll start with the fact that you went through this process in your late 20s. But imagine there are thousands upon thousands of children who are being born in this life with a special purpose. And they discover this purpose when they are 2 years old or 4 years or 7 years old. And that imaginary friend is their connection to the source. And if they don't explain properly to their parents, and at that age they might not have the means to explain them properly, they will be labeled insane, taken to a psychiatric doctor, and again he will prescribe the same things you were prescribed. So that's the drama, that the parents are not prepared to understand their children when they go through an awakening process. And you have generation after generation or considerable percentages of each generation which are being labeled insane and put on drugs. That's the drama of the society, and that moves forward as a snowball. And I completely agree that mentally we are not prepared for the wave or emotional wave the moment we tap into the source and start downloading. I briefly went through something like, when I say briefly, I mean hours. I'm not days, or and I didn't have to go to any hospital or anything like that. But again, I had to decode the message based on my limited beliefs and what my subconscious knew at that time. And I was lucky that I was able to come out of it very, very soon, like again, within hours. But during that process, I had the thought that, okay, so this is what a schizophrenic, being a schizophrenic looks like. I had that very clear thought. And I said, okay, I wish myself luck. Hopefully I'll be able to get out of it. And I was able to. But for any one of us, that danger or, shadow is there pretty much every single time. If we want to start developing us spiritually, if we want to live our lives, going to work, coming home, eat, sleep, read a book, travel, that might not, we might not be in danger of trying to find ourselves, find our purpose, and develop ourselves spiritually. But when we start doing the work, this is when the so-called the danger comes, that we have to be prepared mentally and emotionally.
Yes. Yes.
We touch on the work New World Together did up to now, the research and the findings. But let's go a little bit deeper and what they mean for the human species, and notably the evolution, from Homo Sapiens to Homo Conscious.
So basically, what we found with New World Together, and it's also related to my own process of awakening. I entered my process because I realized that we were on the trajectory path towards self-termination. And it became increasingly clear for me that this paradigm in which we are in competition for accumulation of capital and short-term profits and growth could not last eternally on our finite planet, and it was sending us toward disaster. And so basically, that realization led me to my awakening. And what I found through our transdisciplinary research is that this crisis of sustainability that is taking a global scale right now. We might feel it with climate change and biodiversity loss and rising inequalities and financial debts and geopolitical tensions. And we can see that this will not last in the current pattern. I think many people can feel that, and there's many scientific reports that confirm it. That the situation is not getting better. We are doing a lot of technological progress, and interestingly, things we are doing, if we were sane, then we should see the conditions on our planet improve. Yet it's the other way around. It seems that our progress is playing against us, which means that we are on a self-destructive pattern. And so what we found is that basically the issue is related with primal survival mechanisms that are associated with the time in which we were part of nature. So I'm gonna re-summarize that and making it really in a nutshell. But basically, like the human species has spent, Homo Sapiens has spent most of its existence integrated, incorporated within nature, part of the wildness of nature. And so to survive in the wild, we have developed a survival instinct, survival mechanisms that are not necessarily conscious. In fact, most of them are unconscious. It's just what we need to do to survive. And so these primal survival mechanisms are millions of years old. They And we have, since a few hundred years now, entered the Anthropocene, which means slowly but surely, and no more quickly, sapiens has taken a dominant place on the surface of the globe. He has defeated other big predators thanks to technological progress, basically. And so we've entered a new era of human existence in which not only do we dominate our natural environment, but we can transform it with exponential technological power, which includes an exponential increase of our impact on the natural environment, of our ability to transform ourselves and the natural environment. And what happened in that new context is that the primal survival mechanisms that have served us to survive are increasingly becoming self-destructive. One way I like this example is, I think Daniel Schmartenberger speaks about that. He's a great thinker, by the way, if you heard of him. But imagine lions. Lions evolve with the time, but the antelopes that they chase evolve at the same time as the lions, which means that as the lions develop their ability to catch their prey develop their ability to escape lions. And so there is an alignment, it's growing in balance. But no, if the lions start to exponentially increase their capacity to catch their prey with technological progress, and their prey don't, what happens is that the lions start over-consuming their prey, and their population grow really fast, but sooner or later they start debasing the resources that they need for their own survival, and that is a process of self-termination. Now, this is what's happening with the human species, and what we need to do if we want to avoid self-extinction is to integrate, transmute, transcend our predatory ways or primal survival mechanism. And that by itself is an evolutionary step, because here we are starting to speak about a process of conscious evolution. What does that mean is that as a species, we recognize that the unconscious survival mechanism that have served us for so long, that has teach us to fight, to dominate and control our environment, to compete, to hoard resources and accumulate them, to fit in within norms in order to remain in a cohesive group. These very patterns, and I'm just citing some of the biggest ones that are not sustainable right now, and I could go into that if you want, but it's not the point right now. But these patterns that are deep-rooted, that we've considered as human nature, are now increasingly self-destructive. And the only way to change that is through conscious evolution. So the good news into that I'm going to describe will be what's the good news is that these primal survival mechanisms, we have no agency on them as long as they are unconscious. If the mechanisms are happening below our level of awareness, then this is just impulses. Attraction, repulsion, desire, fear, we don't really have control on that. But as soon as we start to make them conscious, then we start to have agency on how to modify them. Maybe I could give an example to your audience to make it a little bit more tangible.
Okay, please go ahead.
Imagine that our ancestors have spent most of their existence living in a paradigm of scarcity. And in that paradigm, they've learned that the more I accumulate resources, the better. And they haven't integrated that they could be too much, that we could be over-consuming the planetary resources because our ancestors did not have to think about that. They were not in a position to over-consume their planetary resources like we are today, right? And so basically, that has led to shaping survival mechanisms that give us pleasure when we access more, wealth, resources, power. The problem is that when we have that kind of desire and that kind of attraction to always have more, today we come to a stage where we overconsume. If we are not aware that there's a problem of overconsumption, and we simply function in automated patterns with the belief that the more I have, the better. And maybe I have another belief to say that, oh, I create jobs and this is good for the economy, whatever beliefs we've put on top of that to justify hoarding, right? And this is human nature and I'm just being human. If we don't realize that we are taking part into a process that is self-destructive, there is no pain. There is only pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And that's very dysfunctional.
Yeah.
But now, if we bring awareness to the picture, if we bring consciousness, and that's where I speak about conscious evolution, and we realize that we are taking part into a process that is self-destructive, that we are taking part into a pattern that is bringing the human civilization into the verge of a collapse and potentially humanity towards self-termination, then suddenly the pleasure of hoarding resources that is associated with my primal survival mechanism is becoming a pain. Because nobody in their right mind with the slight amount of consciousness want to do that, want to participate in the destruction of our civilization, want to participate in the destruction of human life or life on Earth. And so this is where, when we start to realize that, oh my God, I'm not just a guy who's being successful and creating jobs and making the economy grow, but I am somebody who's addicted to patterns that are self-destructive, then there is a shift taking place. Then suddenly the primal survival mechanism can upgrade. Suddenly the pain-pleasure response that takes a big part in our survival, the way the survival function, start upgrading. Because the thing that was the very destructive pattern that was providing me pleasure when I was fulfilling it start to become painful. And I can also start to recognize that it's something that is dysfunctional, that is pathological in our thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree that we are hooked into pleasure all the time, feeling pleasure. And also it is my belief that no matter how advanced technologically we are going to be in the near future, if we don't evolve ethically and consciously, as you said, nothing will happen. We are not going to save ourselves. And I really do believe there are individuals on this planet that they don't care if the humanity vanishes unless they get what they want. I strongly believe, because in their mind, there is still an escape path for themselves, either underground or in the air, in space. So pretty much, I think they are willing to burn down everything behind them just to get what they want. But again, the level of consciousness comes back and back and back in every single discussion, and people still, unfortunately, do not understand that they have to work on themselves in order to go above a threshold from where they will see the vista, the truth. And I mean, it could be their own truth from a different perspective, a much more spiritual truth. So this is where we all should aim to be. But at the same time, it's very hard to change minds. And I've been told multiple times, stop trying to change other people by, discussion, or just send them some links, give them some proof. If they want to read, if they want to evolve, it's their own journey. but don't put any other effort. So that's why, you know, having these interviews is one reason, trying to reach as many people as possible from one platform.
Yes. So I think you're right. I mean, we can't force that change. I mean, at least we are not in a position to do it right now. But I don't think it would be wise anyway. But at least what we can do is make the information available. You know, when you say about these people who are ready, you know, to go all the way and to sacrifice the rest of us for them to continue on this journey, I think it might be true. But even if it's true, I still see a lack of consciousness, because it's a very
That's for sure.
very rational. It's not a very rational choice, because ultimately these people at this stage, they are in their position because of others. So I don't know if they plan to replace everyone with robots, but then it's the same. They won't. I mean, it's like it's actually really silly. It's a psychopathic way of thinking, and very dysfunctional, actually quite insane. I mean, here to me, we are starting to speak about insanity, and there's a lot of it in our society. That's the type of insanity where we were talking about before. But to speak about my experience in the corporate world, because that's where I come from. I used to be a senior manager, an expert consultant in the corporate world. These conversations that we are having are not taking place there. The subjects are just taboo.
Yeah.
So it's very easy when we are successful to live in a bubble, because all we see is beautiful. I have a nice apartment, 5-star hotels, everybody is nice and smiling and polite. It's very easy to close ourselves in the bubble when we are wealthy, and to be basically completely disconnected from our world reality. And I think this is one of the main reasons why our elites are not taking the measure that they should take. Another reason, of course, there's many, because this is, again, multidimensional reality. So we always, you know, what I will do basically is look at this reality from an angle that's not common to bring new insight, but I'm not telling that I have the absolute truth. I'm simply bringing complementary information to what people who are listening to me might already have. But one thing that's really interesting to notice as well is that right now, our approach to the problem is very symptom-oriented, just like our society, just like our approach to mental illness is very symptom-oriented. Our approach to the crisis of sustainability that we are facing, which is systemic, which is holistic, which is global, is very symptom-oriented. As you might see right now, most of the attention is on climate change. Most people are speaking about climate change, and suddenly it's not about our way of functioning, it's about gas emission. And I think this is, again, part of what I call mechanism of denial. By focusing on the symptom, on the externality, we have the luxury to avoid looking at ourselves in the mirror and what exactly we are doing, and the nonsense of our collective patterns at the moment. And that is really disturbing for a lot of people, because if they start looking at the cause and the root cause, and maybe that's useful for your audience, I could actually show an infographic about that. Do you think that could be useful?
Yes, for sure.
So basically what we see right now is that we are, collectively at least, refusing to look at the cause and the hidden root cause of the problem. And so we have an approach to the crisis of sustainability that we are facing that is trying to address many symptoms at the same time, but ignoring the fact that all these different symptoms are interdependent and interconnected. So as you can see on the infographic I'm sharing, so I've coin some of the symptoms. There's like climate change is one of them, ecosystem destruction is another, biodiversity loss, rising inequalities, financial debts, geopolitical tensions. All of these are symptoms of unsustainability. And I mean, one by itself is sufficient to create systemic unsustainability. I mean, if we keep destroying our ecosystems because we overexploit them, whether climate change is solved or not, we will reach a tipping point where breakdown becomes unavailable. If we keep destroying the biodiversity on this planet to which we are interconnected, very likely at some point, a tipping point will be reached and a collapse will be unavoidable. The same with social issues. If our inequalities keeps increasing constantly as they do right now, at some point, the social tension will be too high and a tipping point will be achieved, and at least conflicts or revolution will be unavoidable. So all these symptoms just by itself, they are they are factors of unsustainability. And now what we have is all at the same time. And so right now, our current response is trying to fix these things and trying to think which one is the priority, right? So I even heard an article like, I was reading an article at the time, I forgot the journal, but they were asking themselves if climate change should be the priority or if it was like biodiversity loss. And I think what we are missing in our conversation is the cause. All these factors of unsustainability are the consequences of human patterns. They are the consequences of our collective choices and actions. And in a nutshell, what I would say is that obviously these collective patterns are not conscious, because if they were conscious, it means we were consciously choosing to set ourselves on a self-terminating trajectory course, which I don't think we are that collectively psychopathic. So I would assume that they are unconscious. And what I see, if we study a little bit how collective patterns are happening, mainly they are the result of our society. I mean, our society determines what's a pattern that's considered normal versus one that's considered not. What's a pattern that gets rewarded versus one that doesn't get rewarded. And so our collective patterns are defined by our social structures, by our cultures, by our narratives. And if I look at these social structures, these cultures, these narratives, they are not here by accident. They are not here because God wants them to be here. They are the consequences of our collective beliefs. Our cultures are substrates of our collective beliefs, and those beliefs might be conscious. Very often, actually, they are unconscious. They are already part of the collective unconscious. And likewise, these beliefs are not there by accident. Many of our beliefs are actually associated with our collective fears. And those fears, our collective fears, are also not here as a result of an accident. They are there as a result of the past that happened to us and the collective traumatic memories that have been stored in the collective unconscious. And in New World Together, what we call, when we speak about primal survival mechanism or survival instinct, the way we structure it is through belief, fears, and traumas. What we've discovered is that actually these three come together as part of our survival instinct. Maybe I can give an example to make it more tangible. So, for example, if our ancestors have been in situation of severe deprivation, they've suffered from famines, they didn't have enough to meet their needs, they had very tough winters, very often they couldn't feed their kids. They've been traumatized and re-traumatized generation over generations about scarcity. Not having enough has been like constant trauma inflicted on them. So this trauma, this collective trauma that's lasted for generations, is deep-rooted within our collective unconscious. It's traumatic memories that we carry within our bodies. Of course, there will be a collective fear associated with this trauma. It's the fear of not having enough. And because we rationalize, we human beings have the pattern to rationalize our feelings and what we feel, of course, out of this collective fear, there will be a collective belief that scarcity is the condition in which we live on our planet. And that therefore, competing for resources is the way to go. Hoarding resources is the way to go. And then, of course, this will result in the type of social structures that we have today, corporations, banks, capitalism, which is about competition for growth, competition for maximization of profit, for accumulation of capital. And that will result in the collective patterns that we see, where everybody is competing in order to optimize profits. And those who don't or who fail in the competition are being marginalized or disregarded. And that creates the situation in which we find ourselves, the over-exploitation and the destruction of our planetary ecosystems, climate change, biodiversity loss, etc. And so if we look at this big picture, we realize that if we want to address this problem, we need to recognize and address its root cause, which means we need to recognize the beliefs, the fear, and the traumas that are at the foundation of our culture, narrative, and social structures, and that are triggering and perpetuating our collective patterns. Those collective patterns that are bringing us on the verge of self-termination.
Yes, that's a vicious cycle. And as we discussed earlier, I don't think we are fully prepared to admit that this is a consciousness issue or a collective trauma issue, because we don't have the institutions or the real means to bring this forward and discuss it publicly. As you said, it's taboo in the corporations, it's taboo at the level of governments. It's being treated maybe or discussed as in the corners of the society. And I think there is a very well oiled machine propaganda to divert our attention from the root cause of every single crisis. And you can look at the last 2-year crisis, medical crisis, and the root was always diverted by the media to issues which had nothing to do with the root cause. Yes. So that will happen with climate change, that will happen with any other hot social and collective issue, just because it touches the upper echelon of the society, the ones which want to accumulate as much as possible and control as much as possible. So the intangibles, pretty much, when I say intangibles, is from the positive perspective, kind of those who don't want to be touched at the top. Control, they have the downwards policy through the media, so our attention is being diverted to something else.
Yes, so that's absolutely true, and I agree that right now, society is probably not ready to accept this fact and to look at the root cause because they are so subversive. But I also believe, and I believe it because I see it very clearly, that we don't have a choice. And that this is what we need to try for, because the alternative of not addressing the root cause, Claudiu, are not looking good at all. I mean, if we don't have a catastrophic future, we have a dystopian one. And none of them is really attractive. So I understand that this knowledge is very subversive, but I think we need to do the job, even if the collective consciousness is not ready to face that aspect of reality. We need to catalyze the process of disclosure, simply because our future depends on it.
Yes, no, I agree with that. Yes, for sure.
And what I want to say is that one thing that we study very well as well is the collective state of denialism. Forgive my French English, denialism, I think. Basically, it's this collective pattern to move away from disturbing aspects of our reality, to disconnect from them in order to not feel cognitive dissonance, in order to not feel disturbing feelings, disturbing emotions, disturbing thoughts. And right now, what's standing between us and our ability to recognize the situation in which we find ourselves and its root cause is that collective state of denial. And so this is not really in a way, I would say it's simple and it's complicated to overcome. It's simple because it's simply a disconnection from what is. It's simply collective patterns of running away from what's too disturbing and whatever beliefs are being put to not face it. Oh, it's not scientific, or it's an attempt, this is or it's insane, or anyway, God wants us to have the apocalypse and to all be judged and destroyed. I mean, it doesn't really go far. It really doesn't make sense. Like if I face, when I face this state of denial, I don't have constructed arguments coming in front of me. I have basically psychotic thoughts that don't really make sense, but yet it's very thick. Because indeed, this knowledge, this knowing, this disclosure is so subversive that it dissolves all the foundation of the dominant belief, of the dominant social structures. And so I think part of our job is to convince people that they should be more afraid of these states of denial and the consequences that it has on our future than of the truth that they are running away from. And this is back again to conscious evolution, going against my primal instinct, which is, oh, this is disturbing, I don't want to face it, to, okay, I recognize that I need to face that because otherwise the alternative is extremely catastrophic. And so I don't know if we will do it on time. I don't know if we will have the collective emotional and intellectual maturity to face the situation and its root cause. But I think we should do our best efforts in order to help ourselves, to help one another to face this reality so that we can start evolving from this primal state of survival that's self-destructive and become what I speak about in our research, become Homo Conscious. Yes. So in a way, I jump here, I bring the conclusion, the closure, but in a way, the way we see it is that this situation, this crisis of sustainability is nothing less than a crisis of evolution. And this crisis of evolution is asking us to evolve from Homo Sapiens, the human who think but doesn't really know himself, is still pretty much in automated patterns, think that he's victim of his brain or that he's following what God wants. So I don't know what kind of belief we've put right to Homo Sapiens, just a guy who thinks with defined reality through his beliefs and doesn't really understand how his beliefs shape himself and his world, just kind of automated. So from that Homo Sapiens to Homo Conscious, with the English accent, sorry for the H. You will forgive my French, I hope. So Homo Conscious, which is the human who is aware of the self, the human who has enough self-awareness to understand that he is the creator of his reality, to understand that the world that he sees on outside and the world that he feels inside are interdependent and interconnected, and that he is part of a whole of a wall, not a walls, of a wall in which he is to evolve in symbiosis. And so this is this evolutionary step that we are talking about. And I hope this is reassuring, right? Because very often when I hear people talking about this crisis of sustainability, I mean, there's not much positivity in it, right? It's like, oh, we have to fight climate change and we have to do less of this and less of that. And from our point of view, what we have to do is become collectively conscious of ourselves, conscious of our interdependence and interconnection with the universe, with the natural environment, so that we can start to move toward symbiotic ways of interrelating with ourselves, one another, and our natural environment. And so I think this is really exciting. It's not a given that we will make it, because it implies that we accept to face ourselves, we accept to face the lies and the illusions that we've built and nurtured, that we have nurtured until now. We accept that what we thought was the truth was actually just a set of belief systems, and that those belief systems are now outdated and in need of evolving together as our reality is evolving. But I think that really we have a path toward better futures and towards, I think, ultimately unity. But that's
something down the road.
I wouldn't. That's something that I wouldn't develop, but at least towards sustainability in the first place.
Yeah. So Benjamin,
well, I could develop it actually. Let me just.
Please,
why do I say with a path toward unity? Is because if we look at what's dividing us today, it's belief systems, right? So I believe that I am French and that you are a foreigner, and that therefore, we are different. We don't have the same password. And then, like if you are in my country, you are a foreigner. If I am in your country, I am the foreigner. And so, we believe that this is justified discrimination simply based on belief systems, right? Which is kind of funny, because we are really against discrimination when it comes to skin color, but it's completely okay to be discriminative when it comes to belief systems, simply because, like, oh yeah, I believe I have this nationality, you don't have this one. So, I'm sorry if you come from a poor country. You deserve to be poor. You deserve to have less ability to travel because it's your passport, and that's normal. It's like if I was justifying this based on skin color, I would be called like all kind of names. But like if we talk about just belief system, it's normal. And so if I look what keep us apart right now between French, Americans, Japanese, Chinese, Russians, or Jew, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, all of this, what I'm speaking about, these labels are simply cultural belief systems. I mean, they are collective belief systems. They are nothing real. And so if we realize that our belief systems are just tools that we use to structure our minds and our reality, realize that they are just like a mobile phone. And so I don't think we want to separate our society based on who is using Apple and who is using Samsung and who is using Oppo, right? It's ridiculous. So I think it's silly to separate our society simply because based on the labels that we give when we created where our ancestors created the social constructs out of survival. And so that's why I say that this evolutionary step is not just about us being aware of ourselves, it's about recognizing our shared humanity, and recognizing that the paradigm of separation that we've created out of these belief systems is not sustainable, is not very rational either. So at least that's my point of view. People can have a different point of view, but I seriously believe that our evolutionary step is leading to unity because of that.
Yes, and the example of the owning a passport, it's a very good one, because it means, or it tells someone else that he or she is a lesser human being because lives in that particular country with not having the same rights of traveling. And that's very disturbing, because again, we are all the same. And because we talk about, conscious evolution and climate change and what should we do, do you think that Build Back Better approach, which every prime minister and president in the world is talking about, will improve our perspective? Is it going to take us closer to that particular goal, or is just lip service to or for big corporations?
One reason, because until now they've been trying to address the problem without addressing the way of thinking that has created it in the first place. They've been trying to bring solution without having the willingness to question the system that has created the problem in the first place. So I think all these talks, I mean, they are, I think they have really the intention trying to, you know, resolve the problem, but they, again, because they are not addressing the cause and the root cause, and they are not recognizing their responsibility. I mean, it's their narrative, it's their belief system that has resulted in this situation. And for them to recognize that is almost like an ego suicide. It's not almost, it's an ego suicide. It's like, well, you know, we've been wrong all along and we've been selling you false dreams and false illusions. So no, of course, this is not part of the solution, unfortunately. This is what I call, you know, the fog. It's like creating another illusion on top of an illusion to make us, to create diversion and make us believe that the problem is being addressed. Unfortunately not. This is, again, the elites working together to perpetuate their, simply their dominance, their position of dominance within society. If they were inviting people like us, I would have some hope. But obviously, neither me nor you have been invited to their conversations. We simply are not being heard. They are still working in closed door, within their bubble, trying to perpetuate their systems of power. And no, this is not going to work because their system of power is not sustainable, simply because it ignores the very basics that are needed for any system to be sustainable, especially in the context of exponential tech. So, no, evidently, this is just an illusion. Another illusion on top of another illusion.
Yeah, and if I will have the chance to ask them a question, either, you know, President Biden or his team, I will ask them if they are aware of a book called Drawdown by Paul Hawken, which is a comprehensive plan for reversing climate or global warming and climate change. And if they say yes, then I will ask them, so why don't you include any of those solutions, or maybe two or three solutions into your plan when they are so adaptable, where some of them have been implemented at smaller scale? Why don't you take that and make it your climate change, global warming Bible? Someone else did the work for you. All you have to do is to facilitate the implementation of these technologies. But again, in my humble opinion, there is no desire. As you said, it's a smoke screen after smoke screen after smoke screen.
Yes, but there is, I wouldn't see that as necessarily a bad thing, because, I mean, it's not only a bad thing, because basically what the situation is telling us is that we must take our responsibility. We cannot just expect our elites to solve our problems while we remain in our automated patterns, not asking ourselves questions. The solutions have to come from now, the bottom of the pyramid. We, as a species, must show that we have the level of maturity needed in order to not need dominant controlling systems of power. And so it's both good and bad news. I mean, no, we have to take the initiative. I think we are invited. We don't have to, but I think we're invited to take the initiative and to show that, no, those old systems of power are not part of the solution. They are part of the problem, unless they start changing themselves, which we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen this maturity yet. And so it's up to us to show that we are bringing something new. We are bringing change. We are bringing a higher level of consciousness. We are bringing an evolutionary step, and now it's game on. I think we don't know what will be the outcome. We don't know if we will win this game or not, but what I know for sure is that if we don't play it, we are sure to lose it. So let's play and let's see what comes out of this adventure.
Yes, and this power should help us if we take the initiative to better the society and the earth overall, and not stop us at every single corner. Again, they should be the facilitators and allow humanity, allow real technology and scientists to implement these tools which will help everyone.
I think the solutions are already there. We know what needs to be done. No, we simply need this information to be spread, to be widespread enough to influence the public sphere, to influence the mainstream narrative, to evolve everything that needs to be evolved. And I mean, again, I think you are one of the facilitators of this emergence of higher consciousness. I try to be one as well. Let's do what we are here to do, and the rest is up to the universe.
Yes, Benjamin, thank you very much again for a lovely discussion, very uplifting chat. I wish you all the best, and we'll keep in touch to get updates from your work.
Thank you, Claudiu. That was beautiful. Thank you for having me, and speak soon.
Thank you. And to my viewers, thank you for watching. Share it, like it. Support me on patreon.com/Claudiu Murgan. Get a free copy of my book when you visit my website. And until next time, love and gratitude.